I grew up in a bad neighborhood. As a kid, I actually used to be afraid of the people we lived door to door with. I got married at a young age to a very kind man from a good background. Our first child, Philippa, was born just 1 year later. My husband Gene is well off, so we were able to move into a beautiful large house in the suburbs. We've lived here for a pretty long time now. Philippa is 7 years old these days, and her younger brother, Ethan, is 5. While I can't say that I'm particularly fond of all of my neighbors, I know this one lady who kept calling me a gold digger behind my back at a garden party that we had hosted. The majority of them are good people, a bit uppity but ultimately nice. Most importantly though, they're all very well behaved, making our home a safe place for Jean, myself, and our kids. But still, I'm very cautious of basically everything. I don't take any of this for granted. I'm always aware that something bad could happen to us at any time, and even though I try not to overdo it, I catch myself jumping whenever there's a car that I don't recognize pulling up somewhere in our street. I keep my eyes open is what I'm saying, and that's how about a week ago, I spotted something strange. I was standing by the kitchen window, absent-mindedly glancing up to look outside from time to time, while I was carving up a watermelon for a snack. I stopped mid-motion when I saw him. There in the driveway of the house across the street stood a tall, large man, dressed in a tattered white and pink bunny costume. The long ears attached to its hood stood upright, though part of the right one had been torn off. Unfortunately, I couldn't see much of his face. He was in an unsettling sight, especially since he was not moving an inch. His head was tipped back as he appeared to be staring up at our neighbor's window. I frowned, putting my knife aside and calling for Jean. My husband had been in the next room watching TV, but he came over when he heard me. Slightly alert by the unease in my tone, he stepped up to me and rested a hand on my arm. "Something wrong?" I gestured at the driveway. "Look." "Okay," he muttered slowly. "That's weird." "Should we tell him to move it or something?" I suggested. "He's freaking me out." "No, don't worry. It's probably just Andrew playing the bunny for the girls," Jean replied. Andrew is the neighbor who lives in that house, together with his wife and 2 daughters. Jean had a point, but still, I wasn't convinced. "Look at the suit though. It's like he pulled it out of the trash," I argued. Jean pulled a face and I could tell that he agreed with me. "Give me a second," he told me as he returned to the living room to grab his phone before coming back to me. I looked over his shoulder as he dialed Andrew's number. "Hey Andrew, it's Jean. Are you at home?" Glancing out the window, I found that the bunny wasn't holding a phone. No way that was Andrew. "Alright, yeah, you might want to look out your window," Jean went on, following my finger pointing at the figure. Andrew cursed loud enough on the other end for me to hear it. My husband quickly hung up, and we both squeezed against one another to look outside. Just seconds later, we saw our neighbor storm out of his front door, brandishing his daughter's measure-it baton like a baseball bat. The bunny immediately took off running regardless, and Jean and I started laughing. "Take a photo," I gasped. "Quick." We reached for his phone again, but by the time he had it ready, the bunny was long gone. Andrew isn't the guy to appreciate stupid pranks. He flips the second that he thinks you're up to something, and I totally get that, to be honest. Since the bunny was gone, neither Andrew nor us thought it would be necessary to call the cops. We figured it was just a harmless freak, a one-time thing. Unfortunately, this was not to be the last time that we would see the strange man. 2 years ago, Jean and I had surprised our kids with a cute little cocker spaniel. Philippa named it Chaucer, and when he's not inside with us, he's out in the yard. He has his own little house there. Jean sometimes says that the dog and I get along so well because we're similar in that we both always keep an eye out for everything that happens around the neighborhood. Chaucer barks a lot whenever someone enters our yard. Someone that isn't us, of course. He starts yapping like crazy. He's a great security system, even though where we live, we don't really need one. The most people here don't even lock their doors. Anyways, 2 nights after that first incident, my husband and I were startled awake by our dog. It was warm, so he was spending the night in the garden, and we had kept the bedroom windows open to let in the cool air, so we had heard him immediately. Of course, my reaction was to jump out of bed, instantly on high alert. Jean groaned and mumbled something about squirrels in the yard as I had rushed to the window. The cause of Chaucer's fury, however, was not a little critter. When I saw the man in that gross, ragged bunny costume standing right outside our fenced garden, it felt like my heart fell still for a moment. He stood still as a statue, staring down at our raging dog. It took me 2 seconds to get a grip, and then I started screaming. "What the heck do you think you're doing?" I bellowed, my voice certainly no quieter than that of Chaucer. "Get the heck away from my house or I'll rip it." The bunny's head whipped up and he looked up at me. I was leaning out of the window far enough for him to see the look on my face. I hoped that he could tell I meant it. I felt Jean draw up to me from behind, now a lot less sleepy. "It's that guy again," I uttered, before shouting down at the stranger once more. "If you're not gone in 10 seconds, I'm calling the cops, and we'll both be down there with you before they get here." The bunny didn't respond, but he turned to leave nonetheless. He walked off slowly, not once looking back at us, leaving me standing at my window, breathing heavily. "So what now?" I asked Jean. "We called the police or something." He shook his head. "Not just because there's a guy walking around our street. Like, they're not gonna do anything." "What if he's out to rob someone?" I argued. "You can't tell me that he's just some random dude." "I'm not saying that, but, well, yeah, maybe he is. Let's just turn in for tonight, and then the next time we see him, we'll call the cops." "So, you do think there's a next time?" Jean sighed. "I meant if there is." I was a bit insulted that he didn't take my concerns too seriously. Then again, he had a point. It wasn't like anything bad had happened around here before. Whoever this bunny guy was most likely only wanted to give us a scare. Maybe he actually was one of our neighbors in disguise. A few of them actually came to mind once I had started thinking about it. Aaron, who lives a little further up the street, has a really strange kind of humor, and this kind of tasteless joke would probably be right up his alley. The only odd thing about this was that, if it had been him, he would have tried to disguise his face as well. Or at least, it would have been the smarter thing to do. Jean and I discussed that possibility on our way back to bed, and he assured me that he would drop by Aaron's place the next day and ask him about it. Aaron denied the whole thing. He had seen the bunny too, though. According to him, he had found him peering over his garden hedge one day, watching his wife mow the lawn. That creeped me out even more, and Jean was starting to get unsettled as well. In the following days, our neighborhood changed. People started locking their doors more often. We all kept our eyes and ears wide open for any trace of the pink bunny suit. For a couple days, maybe even a week, nothing happened. We didn't spot him anywhere around, and neither did our neighbors. We were all on edge, and the bunny's sudden absence did more to increase our concerns than to relax us. We kept our makeshift weapons at the ready, and by that I mean household items that could be used as such. Jean and I had found a slim yet heavy and long fragment of a pipe up in the attic. We kept it in our bedroom just in case. Still, the break-in came as a shock to us. I don't know why the bunny chose our house for it. We certainly weren't the only ones who had threatened him, and not the only ones with frightened children. Yet for some reason, out of all the families in our neighborhood, it had to be us apparently. It was on a Friday night at around 2 a.m. Jean and I were lying cuddled up in bed. The kids had been sleeping for hours, and even Chaucer was keeping quiet down in the garden. I was still awake. I have these restless nights quite often. I don't really doze off then. I just shut my eyes and wait for unconsciousness to set in. So there I was, wrapped up in my husband's arms with my head on his chest as I listened to his deep, rhythmic breathing. And that's when I heard the sound of glass breaking. It was strangely quiet. Normally, you would expect a loud crash or something, but that wasn't the case, not this time. Kind of like the glass had been shattered in the gentlest, softest way possible. For a second, I thought I had imagined it. The senses often play tricks on you when you're on the edge of sleep. I sat up in bed nonetheless, holding my breath as I strained my ears to try and pick up any other sounds. At first, there was nothing. In fact, there was a nothing for a very long time. It seemed like an eternity to me, sitting upright in the dark bedroom, nervously looking around until I laid eyes upon the door. We had left it open before going to bed. Not wide open, just a crack so we could hear if the kids were up to anything. And it was through that crack that an unknown, hardly visible and yet familiar face was peering. A face framed by a pink hood, with two raggedy plush bunny ears on top of it. My heart stopped when I saw him. It sounds weird to put it like that, but I am truly certain that for a moment, it did not beat. For a split second, I was frozen, and all I could do was sit and stare, almost like I was holding the gaze of that silent intruder. And then I got up. Before I could even register my own movements, I had already sprung to my feet and grabbed the pipe by her bedside. I let out a sharp scream as I leapt for the door, a cry of fury, fear, and to alert my husband. The bunny had disappeared from the doorway in an instant, but didn't have the presence of mind to shut the door behind him, which could have slowed me down. That was an odd thing to think about, especially seeing as I was running down the stairs after the costume man at the time, but it was like a wholly different part of my brain had taken over the task of his pursuit, allowing me to think quite clearly about various other matters. The bunny made for the front door. He had a lead on me as he stormed outside into the garden, but then all of a sudden, I heard a familiar loud yapping, and the next thing I knew was that the man began to stagger, as though he had tripped over something and fell. In the very next second, I was on top of him. He was sprawled out on the ground, lying on his stomach, and I had jumped onto him, ramming both my knees into his back before smashing the pipe down on his head. I've said it before, I was out of my mind. That's how at first I didn't even notice that my weapon of choice seemed to sink into the intruder's body rather than bouncing off of it. It was like I was beating a stuffed animal instead of a person. The man's flesh was steadily giving way beneath me, beneath my legs, my grip, the pipe. My blood ran cold. I instinctively jumped to my feet, and before I knew it, the bunny man had gotten up and was racing down the street. He shouldn't have been able to. Heck, he shouldn't even have been able to get up. I made an attempt to take up the chase once more, but he was too fast. Still running, I watched him disappear into the darkness, as one by one, the lights came on in the surrounding houses, and Jean came stumbling out through the open front door behind me. From that point on, everything else that happened that night seems blurry to me whenever I try to focus on it and remember. One by one, all the lights came on in the windows of the houses surrounding ours. The police came and I told them everything. Jean held me as I sat in our living room, trembling and shaking like a little leaf in the wind. The bunny man had entered the house by smashing the window in the back, thus avoiding alerting Chaucer. Still, our trusty guard dog had come to my aid at the very last minute. The thing the intruder had tripped over. It had been Chaucer. In the end, it doesn't really matter that I got to thrash him, seeing as he had gotten away nonetheless. Yet I feel better knowing I possibly taught him a lesson. I don't know what he had been planning on doing to us, what he would have done if I hadn't been awake that night, and I prefer not to think about it. The good thing is that everyone ended up being okay. The kids had nearly slept through the entire thing. Jean and I were unsettled but ultimately alright, and Chaucer was left jumpy nervous by the events of the night, but that was all. Neither the police nor our neighbors could make anything of my strange observation, namely, the odd feeling of the man's body. They suggested to me that I may have imagined it, that the shock had played a trick on my senses. That was certainly possible, I couldn't deny it, but the intruder had still been able to get up and run away from me after suffering multiple sound blows to his head, back, and legs. Everyone agreed that that part was astounding, bordering on inexplicable. In the weeks after, we met with our neighbors, talked to them, tried to come to a consensus on the nature of the stalker, but to no avail. Someone suggested that it was an alien, probably Aaron. It wasn't even a joke, more like a serious contemplation. Our neighborhood had never recovered from the shock. For years and years, nothing bad had happened there, nothing at all. And now this. Jean couldn't even believe it at first. He was distraught and frightened. He blamed himself for not defending us and my steed, even though I told him again and again that there was no reason for that. He was scared that thing would come back. Everyone was. We thought about moving, just like our neighbors, but in the end, we stayed. The bunny never showed up again. I like to think that I left a lasting impression on him, just as he did to our neighborhood. We lock our doors more often these days. I can't speak for everyone, but my family as well as a couple others invested in safer, sturdier windows and higher fences. There was an influx in guard dogs in the homes as well. I don't know what those who will read this will make of my story. I don't even know what to make of it. It beats me, it really does. But if I had to describe this huge mess, if I had to label it somehow, I would say that, in conclusion, this is how a stranger in a bunny costume changed our entire neighborhood.